Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Try This First. This is the series where we talk to nonprofit experts about different aspects of fundraising, about different aspects of leadership. And we start with the question, what should we try first? Because we don't want to wait until everything is perfect before we start. We want to get started today. Your mission is too important to wait until some hypothetical future perfect timeline. Today, I am, as always, super excited to be talking to my friend Tony Everett. Tony is with My Personal Best Coaching, and Tony and I have been friends for a long time, and he's actually like the secret reason why this whole series exists. Because Tony and I were talking some time ago over a pint about my desire to do some marketing, webinar podcast thing, and Tony said, well, just make sure there's something that people can do in every episode. There's something actionable. And it was from that conversation that the words "try this first" kind of popped into my mind. So thanks for Tony for making that happen. Today we want to talk about leadership. Um, we want to talk about leadership development. Let's say maybe you're watching this because you are new to the nonprofit world, and all of a sudden you've got a team to lead. Maybe it's a team of volunteers, maybe it's a team of fundraisers, maybe you're a new executive director, and leadership can be pretty intimidating. Um, so we want to dig into it a little bit and figure out if you're a new leader, or if you realized you need to maybe improve or increase your leadership skills, you got to start somewhere. So, Tony, to you, what should someone try first if they're ready to get serious about leadership development?
Yes, great question. I love it. I love where this is going. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Thank you for counting me as one of the experts. But um, so, what people need to know about leadership is it really starts with knowing oneself. To know yourself first is to then be able to lead other people second. Um, Typically, when we get into leadership roles, we sit there in our leadership chair and say, if only they would get it together, my job would be great, right? It's kind of one of those things. It's very easy to sit here and point out there and say it's all them. But really, what we need to do is put that mirror to ourselves and hold it up and say, hang on a second, what about me first? How am I showing up? What are my blind spots?
Those two.
Yeah. What can I do better? What can I do to serve my team? What do my team need from me? So it is all about me first. I've got to understand me.
And I want to dig into that a little bit too, because I think, well, first off, let's correct a couple of, misconceptions people might have
Mhm.
about leadership. Leadership is not about a title,
Yep.
right? So talk to me a little bit about that. Maybe you don't have a title of like executive director or director. Is leadership still something you should and can pursue?
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about leadership, it really is just about influencing others around you in a positive way or negative way, right? We all know those people who can lead us down the wrong path.
Yes.
And we say that, don't we? We've been led down the wrong path, right? So we've had someone in life that's led us. That doesn't put them into a leadership title role. It's just how we use those words. So leading people is about how we influence those around us. And there are times when we lead from the front and
Hmm.
say, come on, let's go. There are times when we lead shoulder to shoulder and say, hey, let's walk this way. And there are times when we lead from behind where we actually kind of give someone a nudge and say, you're up, buddy, go. And I think we've got to take into account of all of those
Hmm.
as we think about leadership.
So let's talk a little bit about that sort of, starting with yourself, that sort of self-awareness or
Mhm.
self-reflection as a leader. How do people get started with that? Like if you've never done it, what do you do first?
That's a really good question, right? um, uh, I was thinking of some smart ass answer about looking in a mirror, but we won't go down that road. I think one of the big things, and one thing that's not done nearly enough, is the art of journaling and reflecting through questions. Um, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Um, what what can I do better than anyone else? Because there are many types of leaders, as we've talked about, and there are many different personalities within leaders, and we all know the encouraging rah rah type leader, right? If that's their strength, then let them be that leader. But if that's not your strength, don't try and imitate them, right?
Yes.
You've got to find out what your strength is, and it starts with sitting down and honestly asking deep questions. You can go find it on Google. Just type in there, what are some great reflection questions? And then start digging into um, who you are at the core. And then I would also say, um, go find your peer group and say, what do you see in me? What are my gifts? What are my strengths? What am I good at? And understanding that, right? Gifts,
Yeah.
strengths, talents, secret source, superpower, whatever you want to call it, you've got to find out what they are.
Right. Right. That's a a couple things come to mind when you talk about that. First off, that need for authenticity. Like you
Hmm.
said, if you're not a rah-rah person, don't try to become a rah-rah
Yeah.
leader. Like, because people can tell real quick if
Hmm.
you are being inauthentic or less than
Yeah.
your true self.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm hearing too is that this isn't work for the faint of heart. Like this
Mhm.
is some I don't want to say scary, but it can be some you can make yourself pretty vulnerable
Yeah.
in this work. So um why? Like why is it I guess I'm trying to like chip away a little bit to like get to the heart of like
Yeah.
why is this important, especially in the nonprofit space? Why do we want to really make sure we have strong leadership?
Right. And that's a good question. And I think where I'm going with this is at the core of your question of try this first, right?
Yeah.
We all sit there and go, well, for me to be a leader, I need to go take a leadership course. I need to be on a management course. I need to go do all of this stuff that's external that could cost me a fortune and could be scary to because I might fail. So then I sit there and go, well, I'm not going to do that, which makes me not a leader because that's the story I'm telling myself. I'm not like him. I can't go and do that class. I'm going to sit here and not be a leader. But if we then take leader as the influence of those people around us,
Hmm.
everyone is essentially a leader, right?
Right.
And so, therefore, we want to make sure that we're not leading someone down the wrong path. We're leading them in a way that meets their needs and is good for them, which means I do need to understand at the core who the heck I am and why
Hmm.
I am doing this. And so that's why it's not for the faint of heart. It takes courage to sit there and actually ask the tough questions of what are my gifts? What are my strengths? What are my talents? What are my weaknesses? Where do I need help? Where do I need support? Right? All of those things takes courage. But then when we turn up authentically in who we are as a person and as a leader, then people around us are lifted and elevated. And so they then are free to be themselves and who they are. One of the realizations I came across recently is we are all consciously aware that we are performing, right? That we are, I coach kids. So this is where it came from. Um, but the kids that I coach are aware, consciously aware that they are playing soccer,
Hmm.
but they are also subconsciously aware that they are being judged.
Hmm.
And the subconscious is much bigger part of the brain than the conscious part and much
Yeah.
more powerful. So they automatically listen to that subconscious and therefore don't want to overstep the mark and try something that could lead to failure. Now, the realization came through kids soccer, but the realization comes into leadership and any part of our life. We are very consciously aware that we are performing.
Hmm.
As a potential new leader, we are subconsciously aware that we are being judged.
Yeah.
And we sit there and go, that scares me. I'm going to revert back to the habits, stories, all of the old ways that I've used to do things. I'm going to revert back to that because therefore I know I'm safe, right? Subconscious keeps us alive and safe. So I'm going to revert back to that, even if those are bad habits. And so
Right. Right.
now, subconsciously, we are sabotaging ourselves and we are leading people in a bad way because it's safe. It's
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. That, and there's a parallel too with, my background in fundraising, there's a parallel to, I don't want to try something new, which might result in getting less money. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna try to replicate everything as possible, as evenly as possible, with the thought that it's going to happen the same way. You see a lot of nonprofits struggle with
Hmm.
abandoning a fundraising channel that's not really serving them anymore, or trying something new
Hmm.
out of that fear of,
Yeah.
and in that case, you are being judged by the,
Yeah.
by the dollars you bring in. So it's an interesting motivator, in that it seems like one of the superpowers that comes with being more aware of your leadership,
Yeah.
and building a culture where that kind of leadership is encouraged, is,
Right.
being able to fight against that fear and do something
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
taking those risks.
Right. Because I, as a leader, I want to influence my team in a good and positive way. I can only do that when I'm authentically being myself
Right.
and removing, not that you can remove it completely, but stepping aside from the judgment zone, right?
Yeah.
And going, hang on, I can see myself going to do that because of fear of being judged. I'm actually going to come out of that and I'm going to do this because it's going to give me the results that I want, but it's also authentically who I am.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
therefore, that frees those people around us to be their best self. And again, I'm going to take it back to the athlete standpoint,
Hmm.
because as an athlete, they are afraid of being judged by their parents and their coaches.
Yeah.
So at that point, parents and coaches are actually this child's leader. What if they created a non-judgmental arena where they just liked them and enjoyed watching them play? Then that child then flourishes and
Hmm.
becomes the player that he or she could potentially be. It's the same with me as a leader. If I can be non-judgmental about myself, if I can understand who I am, my strengths, my weaknesses, my values, my gifts, my strengths, I can then step up and not worry what everyone else thinks about me because I'm being true to myself, which
Yeah.
allows me to be free to be who I am, and then allows everyone else around them to be free to be who they are.
Yeah. It's amazing how, what a what a cycle you can create. Like, if you are
Hmm.
creating an environment where people are being their authentic selves, they do have permission, they're not being judged harshly against everything, they're
Hmm.
kind of freed from that, that can unlock some more
Yeah,
positive, or some more
yeah,
impactful
yeah.
performance and activities. That's really
Right.
interesting stuff. Really like
And
that.
again, in the vein of try this first, this doesn't cost you fortunes and thousands. It doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
You just need to get a journal, write some stuff
Yeah.
down. Really dig in. If you want to be that leader, dig into who you are and then bring your strengths and gifts to the table. Because as a leader, I don't need to be all things to all people.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point.
I need to be me. And then if I've got a weak spot, we bring someone else in to be them. And then together we can all be right in
Yeah.
stronger.
Yeah, and there's another misconception out there, I think, that leadership, it somehow it twists around leadership and expertise.
Hmm.
Like, you don't need to be the expert of your team to be the
Yeah.
leader of the team. I
Right.
always enjoyed having people who worked, technically for me, that
Yeah.
were smarter than me, that had different talents, that approach things a different way, because that's what I needed. I don't need a room
Yeah.
full of people that think like me, um,
Hmm.
because I know I think, and it's not the best. Like, we need some more players. We need this
Right.
different point of view. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you don't want yes people around you. You want
Correct.
people who will challenge you, and that challenging, if I'm going to be challenged, and I am not secure and comfortable with who I am because I don't know myself, I am then going to take that challenge personal. Now that gets into conflict, and that's an
Right.
issue, right?
Right.
But if I know who I am and you come up to me and say, "Hey, Tony, this, and it's a challenge to me," I can sit there and go, "Yeah, that's not my strength, Chris, but I hear you. Tell me more. Let's go somewhere with that."
Hmm. And I think too, it's probably worth noting that at no point have you indicated, or are you indicating that, the leader has all the answers right out of the gate.
Yeah.
It's not about being flawless or faultless,
Yeah.
but I think it's about consistency. Like, reflecting on the leaders in my life that have been the most influential. And I think that's
Mm,
a great self-reflection, is
yeah.
to think about those leaders that you've worked with and for that have really
Yeah.
influenced you. Those leaders were consistent in their nature. Not
Yeah.
necessarily, they may have said, we're going to do this, and then realized, oh, this isn't working. We're going to do this instead. But their nature was consistent. You always knew
Yeah.
what you were going to get when you sat down across the desk.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and we were lamenting a leader that wasn't great, and I used a phrase, it's hard to navigate if your North Star is really a firefly, right? If that thing that out there is supposed to be setting a course for you is bebopping all over the
Right.
place.
Right.
So yeah, that's another thing I think when you're starting a journey of being more self-aware about your
Hmm.
role as a leader, think about those other leaders you've had, good and bad,
Yeah. Good
and
and bad. Yep.
who do
And
you
and you just said
learn
something
from.
great. The North Star thing, that is your self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
I know what my North Star is, right? My North Star comes out as a why. I want to help people believe in themselves so they can boldly step into their brilliance. I wake up every morning and I want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
that didn't just happen overnight. I didn't open a Chinese cracker and read it somewhere. It took 2 years for me to actually pen that and get that to where it needed to be. So it takes reflection and writing these things down. It takes an inner look to say, this is what I stand for. This is
Hmm.
important to me, right? And it irks me to no end to see people lost and purposeless in this world without meaning, right? Because
Yeah.
they're just showing up and they're just like, you can see it. And I'm like, find purpose, find passion, find your North Star. Hey,
Yeah.
let me help you.
Yeah. 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 And I think that, again, that great takeaway of, if you're thinking of where to start, to think about, yourself, do that
Mhm.
self-reflection. What are some reflection questions that you've used or that you've encouraged others to use?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Um, I think so. The big one to start off with is um, if you had that magic wand, right? If you could do and be anything, money was no object, and you knew
Hmm.
you couldn't fail, what would you do?
Yeah.
Right?
It's a big one.
That's a big one that kind of bigs out this big purpose, but it allows you to, if you sit with it and really marinate in it, it
Hmm.
allows you to find a direction of where your leadership could potentially go to. Um, Understanding your values is important. And
Oh,
if
yeah.
if you don't know what your values are, go ask someone else. They'll tell you.
Go ask someone else what your values are, not what
Yes,
their
what
values.
your
Yeah.
values are.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They'll tell you because your outward persona tells people what you value in life. Um, and so finding your values, that why statement, I like to go into um, what what is something in the world that's broken that if you could fix with a magic wand, with yourself, with your gifts, with your abilities, what is that problem?
Mm.
Right? The
Yeah.
thing that irks me is people who are living a world purposeless. Apathy is destroying many companies. So let's do some work to change the apathy, turn that around. And we do that by plugging them into their purpose. So what's the problem that you're fixing in the world, right?
Yeah.
That becomes then your north guiding star. Like I said, values, the big picture. And then it's into more of the uh, what do I value doing? So in other words, what if I had to get up at 4:30 every morning and bounce out of bed? What would I do to be bouncing out of bed for? What would be the thing that gets me? Yes, come on, let's go another day. Right.
Yeah. Another, I recently was shown this reflection exercise, which was to reflect on the fictional characters or fictional
Mm.
character that you find yourself going back to again and again.
Hmm.
Like whether it's a movie you watch and rewatch, a TV show that you binge and re-binge, a story that you like, what are those characters and then thinking about, well, what do those characters mean for you?
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
a really interesting exercise to start teasing out,
Yeah.
some of the conversations you've been talking about. Like, what does this mean from a values perspective? What does this mean from a vision perspective?
Right.
It can be
Yeah.
like an interesting, non-threatening way to kind of sneak in there with
It is.
that
I
question.
like to ask three books or three movies that are your top three.
Oh man,
Um, yeah,
hard
no,
question.
top three movies is a good one. And then you say, what have they all got in common? Because they typically will have. Um,
Hmm.
and my three movies is always an underdog story.
Oh
It's
yeah.
always this kind of underdog making it big coming through. And I love the idea of helping underdogs become, shining stars. That for me,
So like Rocky, Rudy, give me one more.
those ones. It's mine is actually, so Gladiator is my number one movie.
There we
But that
go.
was an underdog. He
Yeah.
wasn't, and then he was, and then he changed the course of the world. That was me. A Knight's Tale, another underdog
Oh
story.
yeah. Nice,
Mhm.
nice, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
That's a great way to. So yeah, and I think what I love about these conversations too is like sometimes when people hear self-reflection or journaling
Mhm.
or things like that, they might be like, well, that's like, I don't know if I'm not
Yeah,
that, I don't know about that. I
yeah,
don't know. I don't understand it. But yeah, your top three movies, top three books, like these are like these things can start casting reflections on what
hmm
are these things that I value? How are
yeah,
these, what things are important to me? And
yeah,
to go back to your point earlier, Tony, knowing that
yeah,
is how we build an authentic leadership
yeah,
persona or an authentic leadership approach. I mean, in the old days, they used to think that leadership was an inherited trait,
right.
that it was only certain people could be leaders. And there was a lot of study done about what are the traits, what do these leaders have in common?
Yeah,
And clearly there's some problems inherent in that train of thought, and most people don't think that anymore. Um,
yeah,
that it is a skill, it can be learned.
yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that's also really important to remember that it's not, and it's an interesting because it's not a skill, it's a skill that requires, to your point, self-reflection. It's a skill that
Hmm.
requires a sense of community and a sense of influence, but it's not necessarily a skill that requires like, you got to get super degrees and multiple degrees and all sorts of like specialty stuff. That helps,
Right.
but you can also be a
Well,
really effective leader without.
yeah, and this is where I go to with the self reflection. And again, try this first. Is once I start to understand who I am authentically, it then leads me into knowing the type of leadership I value or I am,
Yeah.
which then allows me to go, I need to read that set of books. I actually need to get a degree in that particular arena or that particular business school or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Because now I can sit there and go, am I going to be a technical leader and lead in that technical fashion and be a CEO that's going to be good with vision, big, all that, or am I going to be a CFO that's going to be good with numbers? And so knowing that allows me to go, I'm going to go down that avenue. Personally, my superpower is connecting with people, making people feel comfortable. And
Hmm.
so my leadership style doesn't need any kind of degree. Need some books. I need to be curious. So I've read a bunch of curiosity books. I need to be a learner. So I read learning books. And so it's all about connection and valuing people. That's the type of leader I am. Right.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't, I don't want to be a CFO leader. I don't want to be the leader of a big corporation.
Yep.
I know my leadership style, and so I will stay in my lane.
Love that. Love it. Um, one last thought, and I think I may have used this on another video, but that's okay. I encourage people who are thinking about leadership development, and Tony, I think you'll probably sign off on this, that you want to think in terms of fitness, not in terms of construction, right?
Hmm.
Construction, let's say my job is to build a house. I build a house. The house is built. It's like a binary thing. It's either built or not built. The house is built and I can check that off and I can move on to the next project.
Yep.
That's not what your leadership journey is like. You can't just say like, well, I journaled today. So check.
Check.
I got it sorted out. I'm a leader now. It is fitness. It is
Yes.
ongoing. You don't just go to the
Yep.
gym, do an arm curl and be like, well, my arms are ready. I'm done with arms for forever. So talk to me a little bit about kind of we talked about what to start with, but
Yeah.
maybe someone's already, in a leadership position and they're looking
Hmm.
to maybe re-engage or reinvest in this journey for themselves. What do you recommend?
Yeah. First, I've got to say, great analogy. And now I understand why my biceps aren't as big as they should be. Because I went to the gym once, I did some reps, and
Try,
that was it.
yeah, try twice.
Try two. Oh,
Yeah, you'll
dang
be
it.
amazed. You're gonna get ripped.
Okay. Anyway, so yes, it's a journey. You're right. It is a fitness journey. And when you think about the fitness journey, it's ongoing reading, curiosity, even the reflection on self is an ongoing deal, right? And so I would advise people to, once they're figuring out what they are, I'm gonna revert back to me.
Mhm.
I know that I want to develop relationships. I know that I want to put people at ease. And so a lot of my leadership journey is, how do I connect with people? How do I build relationships? How do I communicate? How do I ask good questions? So I go and find content and books that teaches me how to do that. How do I build community? How do I influence people? And so these books that I read are constantly driving me down that pathway to help me expand on my knowledge and awareness of that.
Yeah,
There are great, great, great leaders out there in our history that that are worth reading about. Right. If you know that you want to be the CEO because that's your type of leadership style, that you want to execute on a mission and a vision for a company, and you want to influence the company structure and all of that good stuff, go find a CEO that's done an exceptional job of that and go read his books.
hmm,
What did he do to get to where he is, and that type of stuff. Same
yeah,
thing with any style or type of leader. You can find something to read, but it's an ongoing, forever learning, forever growing journey.
absolutely. And the reason it's an ongoing journey is because we're on a journey. We're changing,
Yes. Yes.
and the skills and the talents and the perception that you have now are
Hmm.
going to be different in a couple years.
Yep.
So you want to take the time to reinvest and make this part of your ongoing growth. And
Yep.
as a kind of a final point here, I'll also say that my perception or my observation has been that those organizations, those nonprofit organizations that have really effective fundraising, they tend to have a really strong strategy. They have a really healthy culture, but they also have a really bold and visionary leadership.
Right.
Like leadership is as important to fundraising as your CRM or your donor, your last five donors you've spoken to. Like it is
Hmm.
absolutely critical. So if you're in the nonprofit space and you want to see your fundraising get better, take a look at your leadership. What is
Yeah.
the message? How is the executive director and the board, how are they presenting fundraising? How are the department heads and all the people? How is that team working? If there's a misfire, if there's a misconnection,
Yeah.
clear leadership, authentic leadership, leadership that's driven by the mission, and that's driven, from a place of influencing and empowering our colleagues, that can really make a huge difference
Yes.
too.
And you said something great there about um, bold, visionary leaders at the top of nonprofits, really kind of expanding on it. If that's your journey, again, um, go find some really good examples of bold, visionary leaders and read about them.
Yep.
Find out what they did. Is there something in their life that you could model that's authentically you, or you want to grow into that's still authentically you, that you can expand as part of your learning?
Yep.
The brain is a wonderful thing, right? There's neuroplasticity in there, which means it's constantly growing and forming. If you've got things over here that it's formed in bad habits or whatever, the beautiful thing about neuroplasticity is you can change it to over here,
Yep.
because you
Yep.
just got to invest in the gym and go and do some bicep curls.
Yeah. And to your point, like this is not, this is a library card. This is a
Right.
notebook.
Yeah.
This is free. This is podcasts or following leaders on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Like there's so many free resources out there to help you on this journey that it's a great, it's I won't say it's easy to start because it is scary to
Yeah.
start, because asking people about your leadership skills, asking people, hey, what when you think about me and you work with me, what sort of values do you see?
Yeah.
You're going to make yourself vulnerable, and that can be a scary place. But if you can get over
Yeah.
that fear and get started, you can really
Yeah.
unlock some powerful stuff.
For sure.
Love it.
Yep.
So to recap, we want to get started. You want to be started on your journey as a leader. You start with yourself,
Hmm.
self-reflection, self-awareness. You want to be taking an approach to leadership that shows it's all about influencing people around you, which means it's completely apart from, separate from your title or your place on a particular org chart. And in this reflection, in your journaling, you want to shed some light on the type of leader you are, the type of leader you want to be, the values that are important to you, and talking to your peer group is a great way to do that. And stay on it. It's not something you can do once and be done with. You really need
Hmm.
to make this part of your ongoing professional and personal development. So,
Yep.
um, Tony, tell us about My Personal Best Coaching and where people can find you and learn more about the work you
Yeah.
do in the world.
Thank you. So mpbcoaching.com is the website. And the work that I do in the world is exactly what I mentioned earlier. I want people to believe in themselves. And we as individuals have created many limiting beliefs, and our subconscious keeps us below those limiting beliefs because it doesn't believe we can stretch ourselves beyond them, because by stretching ourselves beyond them is a scary place to be, and I'm going to be judged and I might fail. And so my personal best coaching, what I love to do is help people kind of overcome those limiting beliefs, through coaching conversations, through sitting with them and understanding them, and then holding the mirror up to themselves, right? Holding the mirror up to them and saying, hey, try this, move here. Have you looked at that? It's really about releasing them from the shackles that have been holding them back, so they can be released to be their most bold and brilliant self.
I love it. I love it. And if anyone wants a testimonial about Tony's work, come talk to me, because Tony was an absolute influence on my decision to start my own business. So yeah, it's his
Thank
fault.
you.
So if you
Yeah.
like what you see, thanks, Tony. If you don't like what you see, anything bad is me, anything good is Tony. Thank you, Tony, for being a part of this.
Thank
Thank
you.
you to you viewers for watching this. I hope you got something out of this. We've got more Try This First videos coming soon. We have a whole library of Try This First videos on my YouTube channel. We'll put the links in the show notes. And thanks for all you do, and keep up the good work. And we will talk to you soon. Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. See ya.